Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd, your provider of belief on demand. I want you to join us in a radical thought experiment, this deep dive, one that sits right at the foundation of modern politics and psychology. What if the pursuit of eternal universal truth, the highest ideals that motivate faith or philosophy or even ideology, what if that is actually the single biggest threat to peace on Earth?
It sounds like a thought experiment, but it's not just that. It's the profound and frankly terrifying conclusion drawn by the 16th century French writer Michel de Montaigne. He saw his world drenched in blood, and he decided the very structure of human striving was the problem.
Exactly. So today we are diving deep into Montaigne's essays and uncovering the surprising and, violent origin story of you.
Of me.
Not the abstract idea of a human, but the modern, unique self. The individual who organizes their life around personal happiness, psychological privacy, and, authenticity right here, right now.
And the essential claim we are tracking is historical, not just conceptual. The self, as we understand it today, this focus on personal contentment rather than, say, eternal salvation or civic glory, it's not an abstract default.
It's not just how people are.
No. It is a deliberate political mode of self-understanding conceived in the midst of harsh religious warfare. It was created specifically to restrain the human tendency to use violence in the name of the sacred.
Our mission today is to deconstruct this revolutionary pivot, how Montaigne repurposed human nature, essentially rewriting the operating manual for existence to create this new model, the self, whose primary aim is what he called the quest for immanent contentment.
And this has profound relevance to everyone listening, regardless of your personal beliefs. This new identity, defined by seeking sufficiency and happiness entirely within this life, within the boundaries of time and nature, it stands as the common background assumption beneath all modern political debates.
Think about it. Whether you are arguing over progressive policies or conservative values, you are fundamentally arguing over the best way to govern human beings, understood as selves, who want to be happy, safe, and fulfilled in this world.
We are tracing what might be the most significant philosophical shift of the last 5 centuries. The transition from the turbulent, transcendent soul, which is always yearning for eternity, always willing to die or kill for ultimate truth,
to the peaceful, contained self, which, just wants to plant its cabbages in peace and be left alone, to truly grasp the urgency and the radical nature of Montaigne's philosophy. You have to ground it in historical trauma. This was not armchair theorizing.
No, not at all. Montaigne's life, which spanned the middle and latter half of the 16th century, coincided precisely with the worst of the European wars of religion.
He was living through a societal nervous breakdown.
He called it, with this devastating clarity, the notable spectacle of our public death. Picture France at that time. It's a brutal, drawn-out, three-way civil conflict.
So you have the militant Protestants, the Huguenots.
Right. Then you have these fiercely radical Catholic leagues, and caught in the middle is a weak, often treacherous monarchy trying to play them against one another.
And this wasn't organized warfare in the way we think of it now. It was neighbor turning against neighbor, punctuated by, bouts of plague and famine.
Total chaos. The philosophical stakes were immediate. How do you live a decent life when the search for God is producing nothing but cruelty and, in some cases, cannibalism?
And the nadir of this, the moment that acted as a sort of philosophical concussion for the entire era, was the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre.
It started in Paris on August 24th, 1572. And it's significant that Montaigne retired to his library to begin writing his essays that very year.
I think we need to linger on the horror of that night to really understand the scale of his reaction. Thousands of Protestants, the Huguenots, had gathered in Paris for a royal marriage.
It was supposed to be an act of reconciliation.
Exactly. Instead, they were systematically slaughtered, initially on the order of the Queen Mother, Catherine de' Medici, and the weak King Charles IX.
And the killing didn't stop in Paris. It spread like a virus throughout the provinces. The estimates are anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 people massacred across France over a period of weeks.
The trauma was immense. Contemporary accounts speak of rivers running red with blood.
And as the sources note, the subsequent winter famine was so terrible that men ate one another. This was total societal collapse driven by dogmatic certainty.
Right. And the scale of that horror demanded a deep, almost cynical reflection on its cause, and Montaigne provided one of the most shocking indictments ever penned.
He looked at these vast oceans of blood, spilled not over decades but over simple theological concepts, and he concluded it was all over a pedantic academic dispute over the meaning of that syllable, hoc.
That one syllable.
Just one. And that is Montaigne's genius, or perhaps his profound cynical pragmatism. He didn't just see bad kings or political rivalry. He saw a philosophical absurdity driving the slaughter.
So he was referring to the words, hoc est enim corpus meum.
Hoc est enim corpus meum, which means, for this is my body, pronounced during the consecration of the bread and wine during Mass.
And the dispute was about transubstantiation. This is the core Catholic doctrine concerning the Eucharist.
Exactly. The question being violently argued was, did the bread and wine literally transform in their substance into the body and blood of Christ, which was the Catholic view?
Or was it a symbolic, spiritual, or consubstantial presence, which were the various Protestant views?
The stakes were transcendent. Eternal truth, the precise mechanism of God's presence, salvation itself. But Montaigne's conclusion was purely pragmatic. One should not have one's neighbors tortured and roasted alive over such interpretations.
So the sheer volume of violence proved to him that the pursuit of transcendent certainty itself was the societal poison.
That's it.
But wait, let me challenge that for a moment. Doesn't that sound a little bit cowardly? The moment things get difficult, you just declare that truth isn't worth fighting for? Because the search for high ideals, for justice, for liberty, that's also fueled good things. Montaigne seems to be saying, don't aim high, it only causes trouble.
And that is precisely the charge that critics like Pascal later leveled against him. But Montaigne would counter that his contemporaries weren't fighting for justice. They were fighting for the certainty of their own interpretation of God's will.
Okay.
And they believed that certainty gave them license to extinguish anyone who disagreed. His cure, therefore, had to be a complete philosophical reversal, a systematic campaign against aspiration itself.
So if the transcendent soul is the problem, what was the immediate, challenging alternative he offered to his contemporaries, who were obsessed with the fate of their immortal souls and the next life?
He suggested they learn to die.
But he did it backwards, right?
Completely backwards. The traditional classical and Christian exercise, memento mori, remember you must die, is meant to turn us toward the next life, reminding us of the vanity of this temporary existence. Montaigne's version violently rebuffs the transcendent aspirations of the human soul. It confines the imagination, the faculty that dreams of heaven and eternal glory, firmly within the horizon of immanence.
I like that phrase, horizon of immanence. It means confining all our attention and ambition to what is available within this life, within nature. It's like putting on philosophical blinders.
Precisely, because Montaigne saw that the human problem is not necessarily evil intention, but a natural, erroneous concern with what lies beyond our natural lives. That concern is what launches us into chaos.
He describes this natural, restless state so powerfully in the essays. He says, we are never at home, we are always beyond. Fear, desire, and hope launch us toward the future.
And rob us of the sentiment and consideration of what is, to amuse us with what will be, even when we will be no longer.
That diagnosis is key. It shows that the human spirit is naturally restless. We are always projecting ourselves forward, worrying about next week, planning for retirement, striving for a legacy.
Or, in the 16th century, ensuring our place in heaven. All of that future gazing robs us of the only time we actually possess, the present.
So to know ourselves, therefore, means to stop that projection. It means to take hold of present goods and settle ourselves into them, and actively refuse these superfluous occupations and useless projects.
All the things driven by concern for what lies beyond our natural lives. It's about radically contracting your focus.
And he criticizes not just the Christian obsession with eternity, but, well, everything that takes us beyond ourselves.
Everything. The love of knowledge for its own sake, the desperate pursuit of public honor, even the obsessive pursuit of classical virtue. He challenges us to stop measuring our lives against any transcendent goal and instead to practice the art of immanent contentment.
And that art is the system that transforms the violent, striving soul into the contained, peaceful self.
If the new objective is immanent contentment, peace, and happiness achievable right here, we need a rigorous philosophical mechanism to achieve that shift.
And that mechanism, the engine room of the modern self, is what Montaigne called circumscription.
Yes. Let's spend some time on this because it's the operational instruction for the entire philosophy. It's the mental discipline he prescribes.
So how would you define it?
Think of it this way. Circumscription is the deliberate mental exercise of reining in our naturally outward-bound restless desires. It's forcing them to start running off toward eternity or glory or transcendent truth.
And instead making them run in a short, closed loop that circles back immediately to ourselves.
Exactly. The instruction itself is short and sharp. The course of our desires must be circumscribed and restrained to the tight limit of the closest and most contiguous good things.
So traditionally, human desires for wisdom, power, salvation, they run in a straight line that ends up elsewhere.
And that straight line is inherently unstable. You can never reach the end, so you're always striving, always discontent, and always willing to sacrifice present peace for future attainment.
In modern terms, that straight line is the career ladder, the constant scrolling for the next piece of information, the chase for social media influence.
That's a great analogy. It is always outward bound, leaving you constantly behind.
Right.
Montaigne demands a revolution in desire. The new self requires these desires to run in a circle of which the 2 points grasp one another and meet in ourselves by a brief contour.
So you're seeking fulfillment not by reaching out and conquering, but by circling back in, recognizing the sufficiency of what you already have right now.
That's the core of it. But to achieve this radical containment, Montaigne realized he had to fundamentally humble the human being.
Because the reason people fight wars over the syllable hawk is because they believe their intellect is divine and capable of grasping absolute truth.
Absolutely. Montaigne had to lower our sights. He used his pen to disabuse humanity of its imaginary kingship over nature. He had to convince his readers they were not the centerpiece of the universe.
And that their capacity for reason was not a divine conquering tool.
He does this masterfully in his longest and perhaps most famous essay, The Apology for Raymond Sebond, which is essentially a giant systematic exercise in human humiliation.
Right, where he catalogs the marvelous powers of animals, the sonar of the bat, the sting of the jellyfish, the loyalty of dogs, all these powers totally unknown to us, all to combat human presumption.
He essentially argued that we are hopelessly anthropocentric. I mean, we can't even decipher the language or inner thoughts of our own pets. How dare we claim to grasp the infinite mind of God?
We can't know where we truly stand in the order of things.
Not at all. And then you get the beautifully simple anecdote that just levels the playing field, the famous cat test.
When I play with my cat, who knows whether she amuses herself with me more than I do with her?
That one line completely reverses the Socratic and Aristotelian tradition. Classical philosophy defined humanity by reason, the faculty that sets us apart from and above animals.
But Montaigne critiques that supposed superiority.
He digs in deep. He suggests it is actually our unruly imagination, not reason, that primarily marks us off from animals, and he says this is to our detriment, not our glory.
The unruly imagination, so the thing that dreams up philosophical systems, eternal empires, and complex theological disputes.
That, he says, is the source of sin, illness, irresolution, trouble, and despair. The problem isn't that we fail to cultivate our divine spark. The problem is our doomed attempt to rise above our natural limits.
So the new wisdom is profoundly anti-intellectual and anti-heroic. If reason leads to chaos and imagination leads to violence, where do we look for wisdom?
Montaigne suggests following animals and peasants, the most humble of human beings, because they are closer to nature. They corrupt themselves less with the unruly activity of the imagination.
The point isn't to be stupid, it's to prioritize unmediated experience over complex philosophical striving.
Yes. And this takes us to the core transformation, moving from the ideal of the transcendent soul to the sufficiency of the self.
This is such a radical departure. The entire philosophical and theological tradition Montaigne inherited, from Socrates to Augustine, insisted there was a one thing needful.
Right. Life without philosophy or citizenship or salvation was considered subhuman or just a failure?
Montaigne contests this common principle entirely. He steps away from the role of the jurist, or the academic, or the theologian, and speaks to us simply as a human being.
And in doing so, he introduces a whole new, legitimate stratum of human life. Mere life. Life for its own sake, life without the orienting transcendent norms of philosophy, politics, or faith.
Which brings us to defining immanent contentment. What's the cocktail party definition?
It's happiness found entirely within the boundaries of this life, achieved by stopping the pursuit of anything transcendent, whether that's heaven, eternal fame, or universal truth.
And Montaigne's own revolutionary formulation of this is just stunning. Mon métier, mon art, c'est vivre, or
My work and my art is living.
when you put that into the historical context of his time, that statement is an absolute bomb. It directly contradicts the Renaissance ideal that life must be dedicated to some higher, specialized pursuit.
Like military service, theological scholarship, or great art. Yes.
He drives that point home with the aphorism, "We are great fools. He has passed his life in idleness," we say. "I have done nothing today."
What? Have you not lived? That is not only your fundamental occupation, but your most illustrious one.
He's saying that the sheer, unadorned act of being alive, in conformity with our natural, circumscribed condition, is sufficient, even illustrious.
That sentence represents a widespread rejection of centuries of thought that refuse to accept the limits of time and death. It reclaims the ordinary as the extraordinary.
Okay, so the moment you reject that universal aspiration to merge with eternal truth, to achieve immortal glory, you're to redefine how you understand yourself morally. If you're not striving to be man with a capital M, who are you?
Well, Montaigne argued that philosophy's failure to achieve universal knowledge was absolute. If the human striving for objective knowledge always leads to conflicting truths and violence, then that path must be abandoned.
And he had the evidence. He meticulously cataloged the chaos. Philosophers defined man as everything from a rational animal to a bird with 2 feet and no feathers.
Right. And their searches for the summum bonum, the highest good, produced at least 288 rival conceptions. This intellectual diversity wasn't peaceful coexistence. It was intellectual chaos leading to bloody conflict.
Their attempts to live out these visions often proved absurd, too, as he noted. The stargazer Thales falling into a well, or the cynic Diogenes living in a barrel.
These heroic, self-sacrificing quests failed not only ethically but personally.
So the failure of philosophy to find a way to tranquility that is good for all leads to the new, modest quest.
Which is because philosophy has been unable to find a way to tranquility that is good for all. Let each man seek it individually.
This individualizes the quest for self-knowledge, moving it from the abstract knowledge of man to the particular knowledge of me.
He famously writes, "I study myself more than any other subject. That is my physics, that is my metaphysics. This makes the self the only reliable object of study in a chaotic world."
And this focus requires a new internal blueprint, which he called the form mistress.
The form maestris. But we can translate that as the master pattern. It is your unique, particular, enduring unity of character, a messy mix of nature, habit, and accident, which replaces the rigid, universal ideal of human nature or virtue.
In modern terms, it's not an ideal state you reach. It's the stable, complicated reality of who you actually are. Is your operating system, quirks included.
Right, rather than a factory-set moral template. And how did Montaigne discover this natural form? Through the unprecedented act of writing about himself.
He violates the traditional interdiction weighing on the first person by using I more than 8,000 times in the essays.
He writes about Homer, cannibals, and Parthian arms only to reveal himself more fully. The external topics are just mirrors. He's using them to prompt the activity of his own judgment and revere his particular nature.
So the self-portrait itself becomes the new, legitimate mode of philosophical understanding.
Exactly. And the moral goal then shifts dramatically. Instead of aspiring to be an angel or Cato, a universal abstract ideal, the goal is merely being true to oneself.
The entire moral standard contracts and turns inward, aligning with this internal standard of the mistress form.
Right.
But doesn't being true to oneself often mean being selfish or inconsistent? In a world of transcendent goals, virtue meant consistency with the ideal. What does morality mean when the self is the only judge?
That is the crucial question, and Montaigne's answer is the invention of sincerity. And it's not just honesty, it is structural integrity, a profound loyalty to the truth of one's own inner pattern.
The great literary critic Lionel Trilling defines sincerity as being precisely aligned with him, meaning the external appearance and the internal substance are unified. There's no moral gap.
Montaigne claims he is the master of this new moral attribute. He says his face gives me away immediately. He speaks the same language to everyone, even to princes, and never makes extravagant promises he cannot keep.
So sincerity becomes the self-referential standard of integrity, replacing the transcendent standard of virtue.
And this integrity requires us to give up the habit of taking ourselves too seriously, which brings us to another great term, nonchalance.
Ah, yes. This is where sincerity expresses itself as a cultivated carelessness.
It sounds like just an attitude, but it's a rigorous, ethical stance. It's an absence of pretense, where radical honesty is the offspring of not trying to impress or put on airs.
The source material compares this beautifully to the disorderliness that one sees in the dress of our youth. The ill-arranged stockings, or today maybe the oversized hoodie, or the deliberate messiness of a personal workspace.
It's the refusal to polish the self for public consumption. Montaigne describes it as something that must be learned because we are naturally inclined toward vanity and self-importance.
He tells that story of a man who was utterly distraught to be on his deathbed before he could complete his history of a certain king. We cling desperately to our superfluous occupations.
And learning to be nonchalant is learning to be free. Free from fortune, free from the tyrannical demands of ambition. It allows us to delight in pleasure and stomach distress with firmness because we realize these things are not ultimately central to our being.
And the ultimate test of this sincerity and nonchalance is how you face the greatest rupture of imminent contentment: death.
Yes. Montaigne says, I want death to find me planting my cabbages, but nonchalant about her, and still more about my unfinished garden.
That is the encapsulation of his entire project.
Uh-huh.
Don't let the fear of what comes next or the vanity of what you haven't finished rob you of the peace of the present moment.
And this attitude of moral carelessness is rooted in judging the self as cosmically insignificant. This is the crucial step away from the soul's concern with divine providence.
Right. If you think the universe cares about your unfinished garden, you are dangerously self-important.
He critiques the arrogance of man, whom he calls proud, self-pitying man, who imagines that the admirable motion of the celestial vault, the eternal light of those torches rolling so proudly above his head, were established for his convenience and his service.
To Montaigne, this belief in cosmic specialness is bestial stupidity, and it gives cosmic license to our ubiquitous self-obsession.
If God or the universe created everything just for me, then my enemies, the ones who disagree with me about Hawk, must be extinguished.
Montaigne prefers the opposite. He finds comfort in being included where all are included, preferring the Epicurean gods who have no care and are unknown, over a petty deity who is full of care and personally knows every little hair on our head.
It's an enormous relief to be cosmically irrelevant.
And this self-containment doesn't mean a lack of morality, but a shift in its focus. So Montaigne replaces universal virtues with non-reproachable qualities.
Qualities which are within the reach of everyone. The cardinal intellectual virtue of the circumscribed self is independence of judgment.
Meaning he judges everything, but without setting himself up as the universal benchmark. He writes, I have not that common error of judging another according to myself.
Instead, he focuses entirely on internal coherence. He considers the person simply in himself, without relation, molding him according to his own model. He judges others not for their consistency with him, but for their consistency with themselves.
That requires tremendous restraint and intellectual generosity.
It does. And this radical self-regard paradoxically allows for profound social virtues: generosity, humanity, and justice. Because he spent so much time examining his own messy interior, he recognizes the monstrous within himself.
He writes, I have seen no monster or miracle in the world more evident than myself.
That recognition of our shared human monstrosity teaches indulgence and mercy. If our own soul is capable of great vice and absurdity, we can view the flaws of others with more leniency.
So the circumscription that contains us within ourselves compels us to come to grips with our own flaws, and therefore teaches us generosity, humanity, and justice.
It's the capacity to let others be and to step out of the judgmental, violent struggle for universal truth.
The ultimate standard, then, is not public heroism, but private integrity. As he says, any man can play his part in the farce and represent an honest man on the stage, but inside and in his breast, where all is permitted to us, where all is hidden, to be regulated there, that is the point.
Exactly. These non-reproachable qualities, frankness, nonchalance, independence, humanity, they are within the reach of everyone, regardless of their station or brilliance. They are the human minimum, the necessary foundation for a peaceful, imminent life. This pursuit of imminent contentment requires specific internal architecture. The self must first secure its internal territory, because the human mind, when left alone, is not naturally peaceful.
Right. Montaigne learned this the hard way. When he first retired to his tower, seeking solitude, he thought his mind would finally settle down.
Instead, his mind bolted like a runaway horse, giving itself more trouble than it ever took for others and begetting a frightening succession of chimeras and fantastic monsters.
Solitude wasn't rest. It was a psychological crisis.
The solution was self-reflective art, writing down those thoughts to make his mind visible, which eventually taught him to marvel and laugh at himself, becoming his own companion.
Which leads us to the critical architectural term for the self, the arrière-boutique.
The back shop of the soul.
It's an internal firewall, a mental space where you hold private conversations, allowing you to discourse and laugh entirely free of external attachments, judgment, or anxiety.
Montaigne advises establishing this arrière-boutique so that one may discourse and laugh as if without wife, without children, and without goods. This is radical self-containment.
It allows us to overcome the fear of being alone and provides a psychic retreat for inevitable loss.
It's a psychological insurance policy. If you practice living as if you are independent of your attachments, your career, your family, your possessions, then when you inevitably lose them, it will be nothing new for us to do without them.
A mechanism for psychic stability in a world defined by contingency.
But this art of immanent contentment is not purely solitary or ascetic. It finds its balance and its presence through attention to the body. This is the application of circumscription to pleasure and experience.
Right, he encapsulates this focus in his famous declaration, "When I dance, I dance."
When he dances, he is not allowing his mind to wander off to theological debates or political intrigues. The mind and body are unified in the present activity. To live more fully, we must be whole.
He explicitly critiques those who would spiritualize love or pleasure, the Platonists or severe Christians of his time. He writes, "I hate to have people order us to keep our minds in the clouds while our bodies are at table."
When we eat, we should eat. If we hold our minds back from the genuine, simple satisfactions of the body, we are doing an injustice to half of our being.
The body grounds us in the immanent, forcing the mind to stop its ceaseless quest for transcendence.
The body teaches the mind a counterintuitive form of moderation. For Montaigne, to spiritualize love, to wish for a perfect eternal union, is to betray it. By keeping love grounded in the physical, fleeting reality of human experience, we constrain arrows within the confines of immanence.
We prevent that restless energy from launching us toward dangerous celestial flight.
This philosophy, which advocates for restraint and self-sufficiency, has one single, powerful, pointed exception to the rule of emotional nonchalance.
His friendship with Etienne de la Boétie.
La Boétie died young, but their friendship was a total union, which Montaigne claimed fortune accomplishes only once every 3 centuries. It surpassed all other social ties, family, marriage, necessity, because it was formed by liberté volontaire, or voluntary liberty.
So unencumbered by law, property, or political goals.
And what's philosophically critical is Montaigne's absolute refusal to analyze the bond. He refuses to say why they were friends.
Only. Because it was he, because it was I.
That refusal is the deepest expression of circumscription and immanence. If he gave a reason, I love him for his wit, I love him for his virtue, he introduces an abstract standard, a third term.
And that third term inevitably starts the Socratic ladder of love that leads away from the human person and toward an abstract form of the beautiful or the good.
Montaigne's friendship is self-sufficient and purely human. By refusing an abstract reason, the bond remains purely personal and complete, ensuring it remains within the closed circle of the immanent self.
Okay, so if the self is this highly contained private entity that finds its highest expression in private life and unmediated friendship, what is its relationship to the state, especially a violent, unstable state?
Montaigne's political posture is famously described as a conservatism of convenience born from the trauma of civil war. He saw the very harmful effects of all political novelty.
So innovation, however justified by principle, can mean blood and instability.
Yes. And this explains the paradox of his life. He was intellectually skeptical, rejecting repentance, questioning the Eucharist, hardly mentioning providence, yet he was rigidly orthodox in practice.
Baptized, married in the church, served loyally during the wars, died during a mass, and even kissed the papal slipper. Why the hypocrisy?
It wasn't hypocrisy, it was strategic detachment. His rationale was not theological, but anthropological. He recognized that religion and law are an accident of geography and history.
So his central question was intensely pragmatic. Am I convinced enough of some alternative truth, some better political system, to turn my family, my country, my whole world upside down in its pursuit?
And his life answers that with a resounding no. He remains Catholic because Catholicism is the natural, customary religion of a 16th century Frenchman in the Périgord region.
Had he been born in Brazil, he would have been a good Brazilian.
Exactly. His political detachment follows the same logic of custom over reason. Law has no rational foundation. Its power is mystic and customary. It exists because it is law.
And trying to change the political order, even against a tyrant, is foolish because another evil may follow it, and a worse one.
The historical trauma of the Civil Wars taught him that the political costs of radical reform are almost always higher than the benefits.
So the ultimate political strategy, therefore, is withdrawal into private life. This is where the self secures its freedom.
Right. Montaigne insists that the mayor and Montaigne have always been two and very clearly separated.
Freedom is protected not by conquering power or reforming the state, but by restraining ambitious striving and withdrawing into the private sphere.
What we now call the liberty of the moderns.
Political activity for Montaigne is not an essential element of immanent contentment. His philosophy successfully diverts the restless passions that had convulsed his world into more peaceable private pursuits.
Pursuits like conversation, books, the appreciation of beauty, and the study of the self.
Okay, let's synthesize this radical system. Montaigne looked at a world tearing itself apart over the search for eternal truth, the restless transcendent soul, and offered a systematic cure.
He transformed that soul into the peaceful, contained self through circumscription and radical self-knowledge.
So the master analogy holds up. Montaigne built the first mental firewall.
Absolutely. The pre-Montaigne soul was an exposed, open server seeking transcendent connections, always reaching outward, making it vulnerable to ideological violence, conquest, and instability.
And the Montaignean self is an air-gapped internal network. The arrière-boutique designed for secure, local, stable use, focused entirely on maintaining immanent contentment.
And this wasn't just theory for dusty academics. The ascent of the bourgeois gentilshommes, the wealthy, educated, office-holding class, shows this ideal aligning perfectly with modern social currents.
The pursuit of private pleasures and self-containment became the new noble life, superior to the risky, often fatal military ideal of the traditional gentry.
The private life became politically and morally legitimate. The self-contained vision achieves political and personal peace by systematically setting aside what earlier thinkers like Augustine called the restlessness of the heart.
That inescapable longing for something eternal.
Montaigne's vision is powerful because it works to bring peace and contentment here on earth.
But his greatest and most critical reader, the mathematician and religious thinker Blaise Pascal, raised profound doubts in the century following the essays.
Pascal called Montaigne's entire approach to life and death entirely pagan.
He argued that Montaigne's self-study was simply a way of justifying his own comfort and avoiding the profound reality of human misery and the need for salvation.
Which leads us to the final provocative tension that defines our modern existence. Was that longing for the transcendent truly the villain, as Montaigne claimed?
Or is that restlessness, that fundamental human desire for something beyond mere contentment, an inescapable part of our nature?
A part that, if suppressed for the sake of imminent peace, will simply erupt later in a new, perhaps more secular, but equally dangerous form of ideological striving.
We've achieved external peace, but perhaps at the price of silencing the one thing that truly defines us.
The choice to live as a contained self, or an aspiring soul, is the defining tension of modern life.
Okay, let's unpack this, or maybe you should. Here's where it gets really interesting, and a subject for your own deep dive.